And I'm sure people we will be joining as we go, but co-chairs, I kick it off when you're ready.
Okay, for those who don't know, Musa Hussein and I are the co-chairs. I'm Joel Siegel of the Transportation Committee this year. We are honored to be doing that, and we will both be speaking tonight and moderating, trying to keep the questions succinct and not redundant. And we have a couple of important presentations tonight, the first of which is by Andy Englesby from the Department of Transportation regarding the troubled Coney Island Avenue and Cortelia Road.
No, Joel, the other way around. Andy Inglesby is New York City Transit MTA.
Ah, okay, sorry, Andy.
All right, no problem.
And okay, and so with having made that flub, nevertheless, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Andy, do you need access to the to post things?
We're all set up.
You're all set up for that. Okay, great.
My colleague Brian's going to be sharing the screen when we get to the presentation. But thanks, Joel. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say thanks to the entire committee, to Sean for inviting us to present tonight, and we really appreciate that. It's always great to be at Committee Board 14. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andy Inglesby. I am Assistant Director for Government and Community Relations at MTA, New York City Transit. We're here tonight to present the construction presentation for the Church Avenue BQ Station ADA project, and we're thrilled that we're able to present this and ultimately to a brand new ADA station. We're very excited about that. I'm going to turn it over, as I said, to my colleague Brian in a minute, but I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues. I think Ryan Lescouflair is here. Ryan, if you just want to say hello and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
My name is Ryan Lescouflair. I currently work on this particular project and construction project management and public outreach. Nice to see you all.
Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, I'm on my phone tonight. So is there anybody else from the MTA or our contractor on the call that can introduce themselves besides Brian?
Yes, this is Jason Vinn. I'm with Halmar, part of the EAE team, the contractor.
Hey, Jason, thanks a lot. Okay, with that being said,
Joe,
Is
ahead,
that Joe O'Donnell?
Joe, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, I didn't know. Sorry, Andy. Joe O'Donnell, MPA, C&D, Government and Community Affairs.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so we know that you guys have a packed agenda, so we'll get right into it. Brian Leona, my colleague from MTA Construction and Development, will share his screen if it's okay, and then we'll walk you through it. We have a pretty short presentation, and then obviously we'll be more than happy to take any questions that the community might have. And I'm going to be forwarding over to Sean after the presentation, this presentation, and also a one-page summary. So Sean, once we're finished, I'll be sending it your way, that you can obviously feel free to share with the community board.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll post it on our website under projects.
Terrific. All right, Brian, all yours.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Thank you to the board for having us. I'm going to put my screen up in a second, but just by way of introduction, my name is Brian Leona. I'm the project manager for this project. It's called ADA Package 3, 13 stations, and I'm joined by you heard the introduction from some of my colleagues just a few minutes ago. The MTA is supported. We have what's called a PMC team. That's the project management consultant, and Ryan is one of those members. They're going to help us manage the project. And you also heard from one of our contractors. The contractor is a design build project. And so, again, you've met some of our contractors as well. They're doing the actual design and construction of the project. Okay, so now I put up my screen. Can you guys see the screen that says accessibility upgrades?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And again, this is one station out of a total of 13 stations that are part of the overall package. MTA is actually trying to, with multiple packages, upgrade stations throughout all 5 boroughs in New York City for ADA accessibility. So here, as I've mentioned, again, this is part of 13 stations in the overall package. There's your location at Church Avenue. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with it. The overall goals of our project is, again, the MTA has been pursuing vigorously trying to add accessibility to as many stations as possible. This project is a little bit unique. It happens to be what's called a public-private partnership. And it's actually the first one the MTA has done. And while it doesn't change actually how we're building the elevators, it does change how the MTA is financing them and maintaining them. So in this particular case, the contractor is part of an overall team that we call the developer, and that's EAE. And they're providing the design, construction, and maintenance of these stations. And because it's a design build, we're about maybe 40% done with the design of the station. We're continuing to do the design. We're evaluating it based on the criteria we set up. And as we proceed and complete the design, we'll start doing construction at the station. We awarded the contract in May 2023, and this station is going to be completed in the third quarter of 2025. And I'll walk you through the overall layout of the station and what we're trying to accomplish here. Here's the location of the station. So on the left of the screen, we have the aerial view. And on the right is the actual spot on the sidewalk right in the middle of East 18th Street where we're putting this new control area. And again, I have more slides as we go through that go into more detail of the actual station layout. Okay, this part here is a rendering of how that new entrance is going to look. I'll jump back. So here you see on the right, there's that area on the sidewalk, and where you see the corrugated steel and that brick structure, that's an unused MTA staircase, and we're right above the tracks right now. So this is an open cut station. And we're going to replace that with this new entrance right in the middle of East 18th Street. Okay, we're going to put in 2 new elevators, 1 elevator to each platform. We're going to put in 2 new staircases, and the area you see right in the center there, that's our control area. And that's how you're going to enter the station. That's how you're going to buy a fare if needed, go through the turnstiles, and then go down to the platform below. We're installing, of course, ADA compliant stairs in that location. We're updating the platform boarding area, and we're installing tactile tiles at the platform. We're also doing modifications to the agent booth to make sure it's ADA compliant as well. Okay, so here on the left side of the screen, the area in purple, those are the floor plans of the station. And the one on the top is at street level. The one at the bottom is at platform level. So on the street level side, you can see there on the left, if I move my cursor around, I hope you can see that. Can you see when I'm moving the cursor?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So here we are on the sidewalk, and you would enter right through the station. These other rooms are supporting rooms. They contain cleaners rooms and the elevator machine room. You would enter the turnstiles and then go to either platform. Right here is where those 2 elevators are located. Again, 1 to either platform. When I'm on the platform level, this is where the staircase drops you off just outside the middle of the platform. And here's where the elevator drops you off. So again, that's our new control area, our 2 new staircases and 2 new elevators. And again, as part of this, we are installing with the elevators new upgraded electrical systems to support it, new cameras, and all the supporting elements needed for the elevator. Here's a picture of it at the platform level. So you can again see up here, this is that brick structure that I pointed out from the street level, and this is that corrugated metal that's on the sidewalk. So that's that area here, and this is going to come out, and this is the area where that new control area is going to be. So we're, again, as part of this and to support the elevator, we have new concrete work going on, the elevator framing, the mechanical work to support that, the electrical work to support the elevator. The platform is being repaired. And again, as I mentioned, new tactile edges are being installed throughout the platform. And again, we're installing a brand new control area in the middle of the platform that's going to have a new roof, new walls, new glazing, new everything, because it's a brand new and pretty inviting control area. So now on this screen, this is an overall view of the entire station. And as you can see, there's an existing control area on the right at Church Avenue and an existing control area on the left at Caton. And we're putting it right in the center of East 18th Street. And just to preempt, probably maybe some of your obvious questions might be is why we're putting this right in the middle of East 18th Street. Why wouldn't we put it at either Church or Caton? And the answer, though, is that at both of those stations, the platform gets much narrower when you go to the end of the platform, and it's much tougher to fit in the staircase and the elevator within that area. And as well, in each of those areas here and here, because it's an existing station and MTA has been expanding them and adding onto them for years, unfortunately, those areas have electrical equipment and signal equipment in both of them. And so the relocation of that would really add a lot of complexity to the project and add months and months, as well as quite a lot of money to make that relocation. And so going through that, you can see this East 18th Street entrance, and you can actually see it visibly from the Church Avenue area. And again, by putting it in here, another benefit it does bring is that, as you can see, the existing stairs at the station are either one end of the platform or the other. So now at least we're putting in 2 more stairs that give the customer an option to exit the platform right from the middle of the station. Okay, so here's a blow up at the platform level, and the area in beige you see, that's the footprint of the new control area above. And we're looking at that elevator and the 2 stairs at the platform. Our overall schedule. Okay, so the contract is going to begin to mobilize at the end of this year, and they're going to start to set up their work area and do some utility relocations that are needed. Additional work will start in the springtime of 2024, and we're going to start with the southbound platform. By the end of 2024, we'll start to do work on the northbound platform. We'll start to install the elevators in the 3rd quarter of 2024. And then for about a year, we'll be doing mostly elevator work and installation. And we'll do the final installation and commissioning of everything by the 3rd quarter of 2025. So again, another key item you're going to want to know about is how are we going to accomplish this? Because we're putting in a brand new control area right over the active tracks. It's a complex project, to be truthful about it. And we actually studied quite a few ways to get this done as efficiently as possible. So to do this, we are going to have what you see there, 3 partial closures. And what those closures entail, the station will never be closed full time. However, for 60 days at a time, we will have to close down either the northbound or the southbound tracks. And so when that occurs, for those 60 days, a customer would have to take the train to the next stop and ride back to get to Church Avenue. Additionally, in the center 2 tracks are the express tracks. They will be closed down also for 60 days. During that period, both the northbound and southbound tracks will be open. Now, even with that work, when we bring in items like the structural steel and we start to bridge over the tracks, we will have a total of 8 weekend full closures. So when those occur, those will occur on a weekend only. They will begin on a Friday night at 10 p.m. and the station will be back in service Monday at 5 a.m. in the morning. So for that weekend, the station will be completely closed. And because of that, MTA will provide bus service on that line, so that customers impacted by the closure will still be able to get to the next open station by bus. We also further provided some constraints that this work could not occur during the summertime period. So any of those full weekend shutdowns will occur on weekends that are beyond, not including Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day. And so again, if you're in the area, you may have seen some of our people out there. The contractors had teams out there. MTA has had teams out there. We've been surveying the station. We've been conducting test pits to make sure we know where the utilities are. We've been checking. There's quite a lot of tests we have to test. We have to make sure of on the conditions, what's in the soil, where the utilities are, and all that has been going on for the last couple of weeks. Okay, I'm getting to the very end of the presentation right now. So should there be any issue on the project, there is a project website, and that's what you see before you. And again, we are going to share this information with the community board. So that project will tell any customer that wants to read up what's going on at the station, what is happening overall. There's a dedicated project hotline number that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's for any questions from the customers that are not emergency related. If there's an emergency, of course, always call 911. And again, on the bottom, you see that's MTA, that's us. Our community relations representative, Nick, and his contact information is there for the community board. Okay, so I've gone through all of our slides, and we can open up to your questions and any comments from the group.
Joel, I think you're on mute.
All right. Thank you for that presentation. It was very impressive. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and I'll call you and we'll unmute you if you're muted. I have a question. Is the work going to be done during the day, not nighttime hours? Because when I saw that 18th Street, I'm thinking of the people that live on that block, probably suffer some while this is going on.
Okay, good question. So again, Brian here on the MTA side, the contractors team can chime in on this. My understanding is most of the work will be occurring during daytime hours. The work will be in compliance with New York City work regulations.
Which I assume includes noise.
Yes. Yeah. MTA abides by all the New York City work regulations. They do include noise limits. I mean, there are limits out there. It doesn't mean that a station work is completely silent. It means that it will be tested during certain hours for a certain decibel level, X number of feet from the station. But again, it's MTA's policy to always be a good neighbor. We minimize excessive work to the extent possible. And again, we do the bulk of the work during the day. On the weekend GOs, there may be a little bit more work in the evening time in order to get that structural steel in. But again, I would defer to the contractor team, but also reassure the board that MTA always remains in compliance with New York City regulations on that.
All right, so Carl, you have your hand raised.
If I can just interrupt for a second.
Sure. That's our
just the live
chairperson that will-
feed, if we can have the shared screen disabled so that we get the video
You
feed.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Okay, I've unshared. Is it back?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Carl, you have your hand raised? Can you unmute Carl?
Oh, I thought Steve had his hand up before I did, so I defer to Steve Cohen and then I
Okay.
can go after him.
We'll defer
Go
to
ahead,
the
go ahead, Carl. They
co-chairs.
called in you first.
The co-chairs,
Okay.
defer to them.
Carl, go ahead.
All right. So thank you very much for the presentation, Brian. And so the part where you mentioned this was a public-private partnership
Yeah.
where the developer is responsible for the maintenance of this. Basically, my question is, so let's say this project does finish in Q3 2025 as projected, and then in 2029, there's issues with the elevators. And let's say it takes an unreasonable amount of time for those issues to be resolved. Does this mean that it's 100% on the developer, like the MTA, like any escalation to the MTA would just be forwarded to the developer and that's it? Or does it mean that, hey, if by a certain amount of time the complaint is not addressed, then, the MTA is there? So I'm interested in is there any SLA once this goes into operational mode regarding expectations for the developer to address any escalations that come up? Thank you.
Okay, actually, that's a very thoughtful, reasonable question. Okay. So when the MTA has gone to, and we've done this on some other projects as well, to outside maintenance of elevators, it actually is quite a complex contract that has held the contractor to the same level of service being provided that our own MTA E&E group is required to provide. And so within that contract, there are actually quite stringent time periods when the contractor has to respond to elevator issues. And if those do not occur, after a certain period of time, they do wind up incurring financial penalties. And so I understand your concern, and you know, like I said, it is a good question. But I do think, I mean, as a MTA worker myself, you know, it's a pretty solid and stringent contract to make sure that the elevator is maintained.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sorry.
Carl, as on a day-to-day maintenance level, we have 3 shifts of station employees, station maintenance employees. So as far as like a day-to-day maintenance and cleaning, you know, we'll maintain this elevator, and you know, we'll be responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of it.
So there's a contractual setup and like some redundancies as well built in. So, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Let me interject for a second. Being the lawyer that I am, I'm just curious. I could well see the entity, and I'm not casting any aspersions on the gentleman that's here for the contractor, that all of a sudden the contractor disappears. Is there some sort of bonding or some sort of security?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I can definitely, you know, reply on that. And again, because I've been on the project the entire time, I've actually been with the MTA for over 20 years designing stations.
Right.
And the contract is stringent, right? If the contractor were to, and again, we had our own legal team on this.
Right.
If the contractor were to abandon the project, we absolutely have contingencies in there for the MTA to take it over. We would wind up assessing penalties to the contractor to cover that expense, but it has been very, very carefully crafted. If anything like that, and even before something like that were to occur, there are quite a few intermediate stages of remediation that if something does not occur and the contractor is not performing maintenance, there's an intervention. If that intervention is not heeded, there's another intervention. So
yeah, that's what I'm talking in the maintenance factor. I mean, constructing them, I'm sure there's performance and payment bonds, but following that. Okay, Steve, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you so much for the presentation, Brian. I have multiple questions. I'll start with one because I see other people have their hands up, and if there's time, you can come back to me. But the first one I wanted to clarify, the slide towards the end where you said about the 60 days northbound closure, southbound closure, and then express lane closure. I just want to make sure I understand, because there's the B and the Q line that run through the station. So I assume the northbound closure means both B and Q bypass Church going northbound. I assume when the southbound closures are happening, that means both B and Q bypass Church going southbound. And when the express lane is closed, my best assumption is that means you're forcing the B over to the local track coming into Church Avenue from either Prospect Park or Newkirk. And both the B and Q are running on the local track. I guess first, am I describing the state of things accurately? And two, if I am, for that last scenario where the B and Q are running on the local track, if that's the case, will the trains have to be spread out more over that time, because you know they can't run on parallel tracks while that's going on, at least at Church. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Wow. So actually, again, have you worked for transit before?
I formerly had the position that Joel and Musa has, but that's my
Right.
closer to transportation issues.
Okay, yeah. So again, you have captured that accurately, right? When the express track is out, then no traffic will be going over the two tracks that are in the center. And again, that's where we're going to be doing certain structural activities that can't have any trains running below them. And so all traffic will have to route to the two local tracks that are on the outside. Our operations planning group, I mean, that's their bread and butter, is setting up the train schedules. And so they would normally, this is something that we routinely do on most of the lines throughout the system. And so when that occurs, they would adjust the spacing of the trains and alternate it. It's a little bit out of my area of expertise on that. But again, they would then shift those local and express tracks, BQ lines, onto the local tracks, go through that section of track, and then spread back out to the to all four tracks.
All right.
Steve, this is Andy again. Just to piggyback, do we know, Brian or Ryan, do we know when the first 60-day period is going to be and in what direction? Do we know that yet?
Southbound is the first one. And that's probably going to occur earlier in 2024.
Okay. And we'll update the community board and all the elected officials when we have the details on the actual dates for these closures, bypasses.
Yep.
Corazon, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Joel. My question was about the artist rendering about the entrance. I saw some of the houses on the left side in the photo looked slightly different than what's there now. I just wondered if that was like artist interpretation freedom. And also I wondered if there was going to be any street closures while the development is happening or the construction is happening, since that's a one-way and there's like city bikes kind of further down.
Okay. Again, Brian here on the MTA. I can respond to most of that. I may need some assistance, maybe from the contractor group, if they can weigh in on this a bit. On the rendering, what you're seeing there was a little bit of artist interpretation. There is an existing house there and a property and a garage in that area, but we're not going to be affecting that property at all. And we're not going to be doing any construction work on their property. As far as the street closures go, and again, if anyone on the contractor side can weigh in on the latest information that we have from DOT, but it's my understanding that DOT is going to allow the MTA, because the contractor does have to have certain areas to set up their equipment. So they are going to be able to occupy one of the parking lanes. And so that will have to be, again, blocked off so the contractor can set up his equipment. But it is not my understanding that the road will ever be continuously closed to traffic. It may be, and I'm speculating, it may be that may occur for a very limited period of time if we have to do something like move a crane in to install the steelwork. But from all of our planning and our discussion with DOT currently, it's not my understanding that side street would ever be closed continuously, or for like an extended duration. And again, I would open that up for any further comments from our contractor or our outreach group.
So, Brian, that's correct. I mean, we're still coordinating all the details with DOT, but obviously, typically they want to prevent any type of closure on the streets. But yes, for the most part, you know, we would bare minimum have that one lane of vehicular traffic open, taking up that parking lane. Like I said, if we have to close it down for a very short period of time, that would have to be coordinated with DOT, and you know, and we would take it from there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jason. And yeah, what you just heard from Jason, he's one of our contractor teams who's working on the project and has been doing quite a lot of coordination with DOT.
I also want to say that we'll be in contact with the people, the residents of 18th Street. We're actually going to be going out there in the next couple of days to talk to everybody before construction gets underway in any kind of a major way.
Sean, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And Andy, let me know if you want company as we stroll along. I also will bring some names to your attention for some of the merchants, and I know you'll do your due diligence without me suggesting that you reach out to the bid, and maybe you've already done that, but but then there's some merchants not involved in the bid on that block, and let's make sure that they don't get caught by surprise. My question is about the fact that this is sort of a quasi road bridge, and I assume that is the road bridge part of DOT's bridge units, or is this fully an MTA asset?
Oh, okay. So again, you guys really, I gotta say, have had the best questions, okay? And I want to hire you and put you on the project team. That DOT asset belongs to DOT, right? And actually, it's quite a point of contention that DOT wants to make sure that we're not adding any additional loads nor harming the DOT structure. And so, in fact, all of our construction, even though we are interfacing with the DOT bridge, we are not. Although we're doing an inspection of it to make sure that there are no other conditions that need to be corrected, and we've also let DOT know that this is the perfect opportunity for them to make their repairs to the station, to the bridge. But no, we're not adding to that. We're not impacting that bridge, and we are keeping all of our equipment well off of that bridge to not affect it. It'll have a little bit of a follow-on effect because since we don't want to put additional loads on the bridge itself, we do have to take over a little bit more of the parking spots further down the block. But just to the point that you brought up, that is precisely why, because we can't put additional, any of our equipment, any of our steel that we're storing on the bridge itself. I hope does that clarify what you asked?
Yeah, it does. And then we'll be talking a lot, I'm sure, but some of the concerns about maintenance are concerns that I share. And when we talk about, that road bridge is actually DOT's to say shovel, but that doesn't happen really expeditiously. I know it might not ever snow again, but that would be, and then even transit, when it's a transit asset, has a pretty narrow scope of responsibility for shoveling. So it'd be to build an ADA compliant entrance to something that people can't get to because of snow would be silly. So let's think as we move forward about that. And then there's a few more that we'll be in touch with as we go. Thank you. And Steve Cohen, I'm sorry, I put your hand down when because I thought it was still up, so I didn't mean to do that. That was me.
Steve, you got another question?
Yeah, no problem, Sean. Just to follow up regarding the parking space loss during the construction. I'm just wondering approximately how many spaces, and I just wanted to confirm that once the project is over, there won't be any permanent loss of parking spaces on 18th Street.
Okay, again, Brian here from the MTA. When the project is over, no, there will be no permanent loss of any parking spaces. All of our structure is off of the sidewalk. During construction, again, I'd have to defer back to the contractor. DOT is not exactly generous, so they're definitely trying to keep us to minimize the laydown areas that we have available, but I don't think we have the precise size of that right now.
You're right, Brian. Rob Stepien from Halmar. We're going to take a few parking spaces on a temporary basis, just for deliveries and crane work and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so you just heard from Rob. He's project manager for Halmar. He's our contractor, the lead person on the project. Who's part of our team building this.
All right, very.
And I just want to clarify, DOT has been very, very amenable and collegial as always in getting and helping us with our permits. So I just want to make it clear that they've been very helpful with the OCMC and with in the permitting process. So I don't want anybody to think that that they haven't been. So And we've worked with them as far as like, the bridge issue and with all the parking issues. So as always, a thank you to them for, helping us in the permitting process.
Yep, that's true, Andy. Thanks. And thanks for all of our DOT people that may be on the call.
And we thank you all for working well together. So, did anybody else have a question? Going once, going twice, 3 times. So thank you, the MTA people, and apologies to Andy for my misattribution at the start. Good luck with this project. We want it to be a success.
Thanks everybody again. And as I said, I'll forward the presentation to Sean right now, and we will constantly be updating everybody as far as the phases and as far as the service impact throughout the project. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. So I am going to pass things over to my co-chair, Musa, who will introduce.
Appreciate it.
You gotta raise your hand. Brian.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks again to the MTA
Okay,
for the
bye-bye.
presentation.
My co-chair, Musa, to introduce our next guest.
Thanks, Joel. All right. Once again, thank you for the MTA for their presentation. Our next presentation is by the DOT. We have a presentation on the Coney Island Avenue and Cortelyou Road intersection. Casey Gorell is going to be presenting from the DOT. I believe Casey's here. So Casey, whenever you're ready, you can screen share and get started.
Thank you. Let me try to share my screen.
Is it Gorell or Gorel?
Gorell.
Gorell. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. As stated, my name is Casey Gorell, and I am from New York City's Department of Transportation. I'm going to be presenting a summary of some work that DOT has done analyzing the intersection of Coney Island Avenue and Cortelyou Road. And we really, just to kind of preface what the point of this presentation is, we really want to use this opportunity to talk to the community about potential changes and solutions that we've analyzed for the intersection, but we're not really coming to you with like a full proposal. That would happen later in the process, just to kind of set the stage. So a brief outline of what I'm going to be going over. I'm going to be starting with an overview of the location, although I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the intersection. I want to give a summary of the past work that DOT has done at the intersection, summarize the existing conditions and some of the issues that DOT sees at the intersection, and then outline the 4 scenarios, or the 3 scenarios that we've studied for potential implementation, and open up for discussion as part of this meeting. So an overview of the location. So this is a complex intersection at Coney Island Avenue and Cortelyou Road. The intersection is a dogleg intersection, which means that it's misaligned and results in complicated movements and very complicated signal timing. So for reference, Coney Island Avenue is running north-south, Cortelyou Road is running east-west, and this view is looking overhead from the north. Currently, both corridors are commercial corridors, with Cortelyou Road functioning as a more neighborhood-focused retail corridor with a lot of restaurants, bars, and retail spaces. The B68 bus runs north and south on Coney Island Avenue, and the B103 and the BM 1, 2, 3, and 4 run on Cortelyou Road and turn onto Coney Island to head north at the intersection. And I do want to note that some of these routes have been discussed as part of the MTA Brooklyn bus network redesign, which isn't final and it's still in its draft form. But we are coordinating with New York City Transit and MTA on bus operations as part of this intersection study. So going over past work. So in 2018, DOT completed an in-house safety project. The project added the middle crosswalk and pedestrian island to accommodate pedestrians walking to the Cortelyou Road Q station. The project also added a leading pedestrian interval, which is a pedestrian head start, as well as a flashing yellow left turn arrow, which was to prevent vehicles from jumping the red and conflicting with pedestrians at high speed. So due to the wide nature of the intersection, when Coney Island bound left turns would get the green light, they would actually jump in front of the through traffic to beat the through traffic into the intersection. And this led to a lot of near misses with pedestrians who were in the crosswalk with the right of way. So as part of the project, we do standard before and after safety analysis, looking at 3 years before the project and 3 years after the project. Since the project was installed, we saw a reduction of 30% for injuries for all roadway users, and specifically want to note that there was a 40% reduction in pedestrian injuries following the project. One thing we definitely want to note is that our before-after safety analysis really only accounts for reported injuries, and it doesn't account for more perceived safety issues such as near misses or the general feeling of being unsafe in the intersection. So we can't really do an analysis of how people feel in the intersection, but we can only look at reported injuries, where we did see a reduction of crashes at the intersection. We also did before-after pedestrian counts to see who was using the crosswalks. Prior to the project, the middle crossing, which was unmarked, was the second most used crossing in the intersection, with over 200 people using it in the AM period. After the project was installed, we saw 140 to a 260% increase in people using that crosswalk. And that middle crossing is now the most used crossing in the intersection with over 500 people in the peak hour. And these pedestrian counts were collected in October of 2019. So existing conditions. We've gotten a lot of requests for further changes from the community. We've had 138 requests for improvements to the intersection since 2018 and the project being installed. We saw a number of requests spike after the project was installed in 2018 and 2019. And we saw that spike again in 2023 after there was a community-led organizing effort at the intersection. And for those requests, the vast majority of them were from private citizens. We did a little bit of analysis of what people were requesting, and pedestrian issues were about half of the complaints at the intersection, primarily with the conflict between pedestrians and vehicles going at the same time across Coney Island Avenue. That was the most identified issue from people making requests for changes. The second most requested item was adding left turn arrows to the intersection, as well as general safety concerns at the intersection. Other requests that were noted were looking at turn bans, making right turns only, removing the crosswalk, alleviating congestion, and enforcing double parking. So the area of interest is Cortelia Road and Coney Island Avenue. The main issue here is the non-standard movements. So the through movements cross multiple crosswalks as you go along Cortelia Road. By design, the through movements function as a left turn followed by a right turn, where people turning left across the middle crosswalk are required to yield to pedestrians with the right of way. However, the non-standard operations does lead to some confusion and aggressive turns. Due to the complex movements, the middle crosswalk does proceed at the same time with these turns due to signal timing. We've noticed that many vehicles do not fully yield to pedestrians with the right of way in this crossing. And we also want to note that pedestrians in this intersection have no dedicated crossing time in the signal phasing. All crossings are shared with turning vehicles for all movements. We also noticed that some drivers stop in the middle of the intersection when they make a left turn from Cortelia Road, even though the signal signage and markings don't require that. And a big issue with that is that when drivers stop at that middle crossing, they're not actually able to see the signals overhead, and they actually have no idea when they're able to proceed on a green light for Coney Island Avenue. And this leads to aggressive driving, congestion, and a lot of honking. Another issue at the intersection is the difficult left turns from Coney Island Avenue to Cortelia Road. Due to the heavy through volumes on Coney Island Avenue, the left turns are very difficult to make, and there's not a lot of gaps in vehicular traffic. And want to note that the difficult left turns is a driving factor, which led New York City Transit to consider moving buses off of Cortelia Road onto Beverly Road. This intersection was a major driver of bus congestion and delay. And then also at the intersection, many of the left turning vehicles actually turn on the red at the end of the signal phase because that's the only time that there's a gap in through traffic. As part of our analysis, we wanted to really identify who's in the intersection and what people are doing. So at a very high level, 1/3 of people using the intersection are pedestrians. the majority of which are crossing Coney Island Avenue. The other 2/3 are vehicles, trucks, and buses. And then also kind of an interesting note is that most of the traffic is actually on Coney Island Avenue. Cortelyou Road is actually a relatively small portion of people in this intersection. So now I want to go through some of the design scenarios that DOT has analyzed. And we're really looking to see community input on these and gain more information on possible issues that we didn't identify, and also get reactions to some of these proposed treatments. So I'll be outlining the scenarios and going over pros and cons of each, and also providing an initial determination that DOT has made on potential feasibility. So the first one is looking at protected left turns for Coney Island Avenue. The second is considering an all pedestrian phase for the intersection. And the third is looking at making minor markings and signage improvements. And then at the end of this, once we go through all the scenarios, opening up for community discussion and reactions. So the first scenario we looked at was adding protected left turns to Coney Island Avenue to make the left turn onto Cortelyou Road. This scenario would add a 12-second protected left turn phase with a green arrow, a green turn arrow. We would not make any other changes to the intersection under this scenario. So what would you have to do to make this work? Currently, the signal timing is limited to a 120-second signal cycle. A good way to think about signal timing is that it's a pie, everyone gets a slice. You don't really add time, you have to take it from someone else. So if you want a new slice, you have to take it from another direction. And a big issue at this intersection is that the existing phases for Cortelyou Road are unable to be merged due to the offset geometry and vehicular conflicts. So we have to currently have the phase for the split LPI and Coney Island Avenue through traffic, then a phase for eastbound Cortelyou, and then a phase for westbound Cortelyou. Another issue with changing the signal timing here is that the Cortelyou Road phases cannot be shortened due to the crosswalk clearance time and the roadway width to allow pedestrians sufficient time to cross Coney Island Avenue. So as a result of these limitations, the time for the left turns must be taken from Coney Island through traffic. So that's here where it is proposed. It would be after Coney Island through traffic gets their phases, there would be a 12-second protected left turn phase. An interesting thing to know is that instead of the current 56 seconds that Coney Island gets, it would result in it only getting 44 seconds. In comparison, Coney Island Avenue gets 81 seconds of green time at Avenue C, the next north intersection. This reduction in time would greatly reduce capacity and would result in queue spillbacks. It would spill back all the way to Dorchester Road in the AM and would spill back to Avenue C in the PM peak hour. The level of service would actually degrade from a D and C to an F and D, and the congestion would be very noticeable to the community. And a big reason we're not super concerned about overall level of service, but the queue back is something that can be very dangerous for people because it could block crosswalks in nearby intersections and cause a lot of aggressive driving at the tail ends of those queue backs. So that's something we're definitely concerned about. As part of all these scenarios, what we did is we took the existing roadway users and determined who would be impacted or affected by these changes. So adding a left turn phase would improve operations for about 5% of roadway users. Those are the people making the lefts from Coney Island Avenue to Cortelyou Road. However, the left turn phase would worsen operations for 44% of the roadway users who are just driving through on Coney Island Avenue, which also includes bus riders on the B68. The remaining 51% of roadway users would see no change to operations, including pedestrians. So no changes to concerns over pedestrian safety at the intersection. So the pros of this scenario is that it's a relatively simple installation and it alleviates the left turn issue, which is something that's been identified from the community. However, there are several cons. This would severely delay through traffic on Coney Island Avenue. The queue spillback would block access to the left turn lanes and would potentially negate the improvements. So with all the delay, you may actually not be able to get into the left turn bay to take advantage of the left turn signal. This proposal would also negatively affect bus speeds, specifically the B68, and it does not solve or improve the pedestrian issues at the intersection. So at a very high level, the DOT assessment finds this scenario to not be feasible. The second scenario we looked at was adding an all pedestrian phase, otherwise known as a Barnes dance, to create conflict-free crossings in the intersection. This would also add a long protected left turn phase for left turns on Coney Island Avenue without impacting through traffic. However, the change that is required is that all traffic on Cortelia Road would need to make a right at Coney Island Avenue. The through and left turns would be banned. This allows for the consolidation of both signal phases for Cortelia Road, as there are no turn conflicts between vehicles. How would this work? So to allow for that new all pedestrian phase, both Cortelia Road signal phases must be consolidated, and that requires all traffic on Cortelia Road to turn right, as shown in the diagram on the right. The left and throughs would be banned. The turn restrictions would be reinforced with marking, signage, and vertical elements. FDNY operations would be maintained, and emergency vehicles would still be able to make all the turns with sirens and lights activated. So where would these people go? So from eastbound direction, Cortelia Road, the nearest available options are to use Avenue C or Ditmas Avenue to then make the left or right onto Cortelia Road. For vehicles currently traveling, oh, and just to note, through traffic, that's about 130 vehicles in the peak hour, or 5 cars per signal cycle. For eastbound traffic on Cortelia Road who's turning left to go northbound on Coney Island Avenue, the nearest diversion would be to continue on Ocean Parkway or East 8th Street to Avenue C. And that's about 40 vehicles or 2 cars per signal cycle. In the opposite direction, westbound traffic on Cortelia Road heading through would be diverted up to Avenue C or down possibly Westminster to Ditmas Avenue. And that's about 95 vehicles in the peak hour or 3 cars per cycle. And vehicles turning left to go southbound on Coney Island would also use Dorchester Road and Ditmas Avenue. And that's about 40 vehicles or 1 car per signal cycle. And one thing to know is that these traffic diversions are kind of the worst case scenario. There's a lot of other routes because we're a grid network. So some vehicles might take entirely different routes to avoid these turn bans. And so it's not necessarily that all traffic is going to be going down Westminster Road. So how does this work from a signal timing perspective? Here's the existing and the proposed on the left and right. The traffic diversions allow for the consolidation of the 2 Cortelia Road phases. So the first phase would be Coney Island through traffic. The second phase would be the southbound and northbound left turns from Coney Island Avenue to Cortelia Road, which would be paired with dedicated right turn arrows for Cortelia Road onto Coney Island Avenue. This would be a pretty long cycle, so 30 seconds is fairly long for a left turn and definitely for a right turn. And then the final phase would be a new all pedestrian phase, which will allow for conflict-free crossings in all crosswalks, which gives the 37% of roadway users, in this case pedestrians, about 30% of the signal timing as dedicated space for them. So who is impacted by this change? So the diversions would worsen operations for 6% of the intersection users, those traveling through and left on Coney Island or on Cortelia Road. That's about 6% of people in the intersection, as they'd have to find alternate routes. The left turn phase would improve operations for 5% of users, those making the left turn from Coney Island to Cortelia. And the all pedestrian phase would greatly benefit operations for 37% of roadway users, which are the pedestrians, by creating conflict-free crossings. The remaining 52% of users would see limited improvements or no changes to operations. So pros of this scenario: it improves operations for a large percentage of users, 42%. It alleviates the left turn issue, which is the second most requested issue at the intersection. It also alleviates the pedestrian safety concerns by creating conflict-free crossings. And it improves bus operations, which would alleviate concerns from New York City Transit about bus operation delays on Cortelia Road. Cons, there are cons. It does divert some traffic, and some users would have to find alternate routes. Maintaining emergency access does not allow for physical barriers to reinforce the turn bans. So compliance with the turn bans and diversions could be problematic and is something we need to evaluate further. But at a high level, the DOT assessment finds this alternative to be feasible, pending some additional review and potentially additional traffic studies. But at a high level, we do see it as feasible. The final scenario that we looked at is relatively minor, where we would make very minor changes to the intersection. We would investigate additional yield to pedestrian signage, look at removing parking in the intersection to improve visibility, and also look to widen the middle crosswalk to improve yielding compliance and visibility, and reduce that stopping in the intersection issue. Pros is very simple. Cons, it doesn't really solve the left turn issues, it doesn't improve bus operations, and it doesn't really solve the pedestrian issues at the intersection. But we do find this to be a feasible alternative due to its minor nature. So I'd actually now like to open it up for an open discussion about the scenarios. Following this conversation, we will look to select a scenario for further review and then come back to the boards with a full proposal, and then look to identify implementation schedule, which will be dependent on what is picked as a proposed scenario.
Great. Thanks, Casey. I appreciate the presentation. Okay, so we have, as many of you know, there's a huge interest in this subject. So we do have a long list of people who do want to comment, and will be sharing their thoughts tonight. To keep things organized, as we do in every subject, obviously I'll be calling on people. First, we're going to try to call on board members, and then we have a registered list of the public who want to make comments. So then after I think we've generally exhausted board members, we will then move to the registered list, and then if we exhaust that, we will move on to anyone else who has their hands up. One thing to note is that because of the interest in the subject, I'm generally going to try to keep everyone to 2 minutes of speaking time, or to ask their question or make their comment. That way we can kind of be efficient and get to everyone. Please try to be concise in your comments, your questions, and of course try to be constructive. I know we usually are. One last note, if we do not get a chance to get to you on the list, or for you to ask your question or make your comment, do not fret. As always, you can send your comment or question to the district office, who will very kindly forward it to the DOT for additional input. All right, so first we'll start with board members. Looking at the raised hands, why don't we start with Liz? Denise.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I've heard from just literally hundreds of people in the area about how dangerous this intersection is, especially walking with children or mobility aid. I also walk down by this intersection many, many times a week. I walk up and down Coney Island Avenue literally every day. I think I really hope that there's something more than just some signage changes, because it's very clear that something needs to change to make this safer for people, from what I've heard and from all the numerous close calls I've gotten into with cars turning at me. I think banning left turns from Cortellia to Coney Island Avenue would be, that direction would be a great place to start, especially if there's a physical way to kind of ban it without impacting other things. Maybe there's like a traffic diverter or something that could be mounted if needed by an emergency vehicle, but would be very difficult for individual, personal cars too. I think that one other thing that really just dawns on me though is that this whole street, Coney Island Avenue, is so dangerous to cross at every intersection. And if you look at the traffic that's coming off of, some of it is that there's these big heavy trucks, especially the illegal 53-foot trucks, which make really dangerous turns at different places, including onto Cortellia, so that they can deliver things to the merchants there. But the cars that I think have made the most dangerous seeming moves have often been what seems to be personal cars, especially on side streets, like turning into just really, really fast, really wide turns, because this street is so wide. And it seems overdue to redesign the street to being the modern street that can be safe for people walking, as well as move this traffic. I think in the past, when last DOT came and talked to people about this around 2019, they'd said this was basically impossible because it's a truck route. But now that I'm a little more prepped on where truck routes are in the city, there's tons of truck routes throughout the city that have are a lot more hospitable to people walking and biking and taking the bus, including 4th Avenue nearby, and other places in Manhattan. So I just wanted to really push to thinking about this more holistically as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm not sure if Casey, you have any. You can choose to intake the comment, or of course respond to it if you want to.
No, I think your comment's definitely taken. I think Coney Island Avenue is definitely a priority corridor for the agency. We're kind of just like at this time, just looking at this specific intersection, but your comment's definitely noted.
All right, next I'll call on Steve Cohen.
Thanks, Musa, and thanks, Casey, for the presentation. I really appreciated all the statistics and all the analysis, and it appears you guys spent a lot of thought on this, which is appreciated because this has been a major issue in the community for many years. I guess I found, of the three scenarios, personally, I found most appealing scenario 2, at least to some degree. I do think the idea of foreclosing left turns or limiting left turns, I think, would be a big help. I guess one concern I do have, one thing I think you maybe might should give some more thought is requiring drivers going eastbound on Cortellia to turn on Coney Island Avenue. I guess my concern with that is because Dorchester is a one way in the other direction. If for the drivers that would usually take Cortellia across, now they would have to go all the way down to Ditmas before they could turn, and so they'd have to like go down Coney Island Avenue to Ditmas, turn back up. I mean, obviously, the people can rearrange the routes and side streets and what have you, but that one seems a little more awkward for drivers than in the other direction, at least to me. The other thing I was thinking of, though, in terms of left turn limitation, if you gave any thought to limiting left turns in the northbound and southbound direction, like for example, I think in the northbound, that left turn onto Cortellia, I would assume if you foreclose that, I would think Avenue C could pick up that traffic relatively easily. And with regard to southbound, like I think it might be worth considering, assuming the buses are still turning left on Cortellia, if you making that a only buses left turn during like peak hours, because that left turn lane gets really backed up, but limiting it to buses only during peak hours, I think would really help. Last, do I have a few more seconds?
You got 5.
Last thing, I think a major issue is the double parking right at the intersection of Coney Island Avenue, Cortellia Road. Those auto dealers have been, using that lane for as long as I've been living in this neighborhood. I think something has to be done between the precinct and the working with CB12, because that's creating problems because drivers get impatient and frustrated. That causes them to run red lights, makes the intersection unsafer. I think that's a big part of the problem. I realize it's not DOT's issue, but I think it has to be on our radar for making this intersection safer. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the words per minute there. We're flying. Noted. All right. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to everyone to stick to the 2 minutes. Appreciate it. All right. So next, I will call on Nina.
Hi. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see that this intersection is getting the attention it so desperately needs. I'm basically in favor of the second solution, which favors pedestrians. I think that solutions need to favor pedestrians across the board. I just want to comment that, I think that, just as people got used to the no right turns, both north and southbound for many streets on Ocean Parkway, people will figure it out from here. I myself, on the few occasions when I've driven there, have done other routes specifically to avoid contending with that intersection, either getting onto Cortellia Road onto Coney Island from Cortellia, or going from Coney Island and needing to get onto Cortellia. I just try to find some other way to deal with it so I don't have to get stuck in that quagmire. The other thing that I just want to comment, which I think may be a kind of a secondary spillover in a good way, is that the things that go on a little bit further up on Cortellia, a little bit further east of Cortellia, when you get into the Argyle Rugby area, is that there's a public school there. It's an elementary school, and drivers are nuts. And just limiting that traffic might actually have a spillover in reducing how much traffic is going on Cortellia when you get by the public school. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you. Just a sort of a quick process question. I wanted, it was it's a thoughtful presentation that I appreciate. And the process of asking for community inputs before a proposal is something that is also appreciated. I'm sure you'll also, because this is a split border, you'll be sharing this with CB12. And I just want to make sure that this is accompanied with a sense of urgency, because this is the follow-up presentation to a site visit we did back in February that took some, effort to schedule. So now that it's done and all that thinking has gone into it, I hope that the community input is gathered and decisions are made with some sense of urgency, because people have been asking for a long time. I want to just quickly take a little bit of issue, and it's not to be picky, but with the description of Coney Island Avenue or Cortellia Road as being a more neighborhood focused retail. I feel like our community members who are Pakistani American and Bangladeshi American might disagree. The barbers and the groceries and the masjids on that block might feel like they're also a neighborhood focused retail corridor. So only insofar as that informs how you proceed on both of these corridors, I just want you to be mindful of that. And then I love Steve Cohen's suggestion that, we look at maybe teasing out the left turn bans to see if there's other machinations by which they can be organized. So thank you for all of that. You know where to find me if I can be helpful.
Thank you, Sean. Casey, I don't know if through some of these responses that you're hearing, what your take back, how you feel about some of the feedback you're getting.
Yeah, I think I can just kind of summarize a couple of them. I think let me go actually to this one. So I think one thing that was noted is the left turns for Coney Island Avenue to Cortellia Road. I think that's something we did consider. I think the most important thing is that we definitely don't want to impact bus operations. So doing a bus only turn is definitely feasible. Compliance is definitely an issue that we've seen where we've done bus only left turns in other parts of the city. So it's not insurmountable. It's just definitely something that would need thought. The reason we didn't propose it here is because it would really not solve a lot of the issues that we see at the intersection. So the inability to make a left turn, banning it doesn't make it any easier. And then the pedestrian issues, we don't see that left being as big of an issue as the Cortellia Road left. So we prioritize focusing on those. It's definitely something we could look at. But that's in regards to that comment. For the neighborhood retail comment, definitely heard for that comment. That's definitely more of a, not to generalize the entire corridor, just more for like this immediate intersection. But definitely understand that comment. And then for process, yes, we definitely hear that this is definitely something that the community's wanted. And so it's definitely something we are looking to prioritize once we have a direction to go in.
Thank you. One question I had, just to jump in here real quick, is I know that the DOT, I don't know what they're called, but I know the DOT has used in the past in some intersections like low level, I don't know if sidewalks is the right way to put them, but islands where emergency vehicles can actually drive over them pretty easily, but they tend to deter, your everyday driver. Have you considered using that option here to kind of extend the island both ways to kind of influence how quickly people take those left turns?
Yeah, we've definitely considered that. If we do go forward with wanting to ban turns and doing prohibiting movements, I think mountable curbs, that's what they're referred to, and mountable islands, that's definitely something we would consider. We would maybe do something a little more quick that avoids construction. So maybe looking at more vertical elements as a way to test it first before we commit to doing like in roadway construction. But definitely have considered mountable islands to allow for emergency access.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Next is Deborah Valentine.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Have you guys considered maybe redirecting the streets like Stratford and Westminster? So like if you come down Coney Island, you can make the left onto Stratford and go down to Dorchester instead of having to turn left on Coney Island and vice versa. Right?
Yeah, let me go to the neighborhood map. That might be a little more helpful. We haven't considered changes to adjacent streets. We were keeping this much more focused just from like a scale standpoint. So are you suggesting like reversing Stratford or Westminster to change operations?
Yeah.
I think that's something we could look at and see if that would improve operations. It's not something we've looked at, so I can't really speak if it would help or not at this time.
Or coming, from somebody that always used that roadway, it's something that might want to take a look at.
Yeah, thank you. We can consider that.
Thank you. I don't know that there are any other board members who are raising their hand. All right, so with that, I'm just going to shift to the registered list of speakers. I can see some people who registered to speak also have their hands raised, so I'll kind of go in that order. Let me just pull it up. Excuse me. All right, so first on the list is Jeffrey Thomas.
Hi. Hope I'm connected. Thank you for the presentation. I'm glad you are thinking about this intersection. For some context, I live at Avenue C and Coney Island Avenue, so I'm very close to this intersection. I see issues with it all the time. When I've been out talking to folks saying, hey, we're petitioning for better bike infrastructure or bus lanes or, speeding up the bus or whatever, a lot of the time when I get a lot of people I talk to say, can you get the DOT to think about Coney Island? Where tell you, I hate that intersection. I think it's so dangerous. I go out of my way to try cross. Like people will just bring this up when you bring up sort of anything about street safety in the area and sort of street effectiveness in the area. So a lot of people want this, and I think that speaks a little bit. I would say, in my opinion, that there's an interest from the community in doing more. So I would encourage you to sort of think about more ambitious changes. I think the barn stance proposal you have really feels like a minimum. I think I'm supportive of it. I think it's a decent idea. I think it'll make a lot of people feel safer. Like the fact that cars have what they think are green lights, but there's also, the intersection crossing. Like it feels like you're allowed to turn, but there's also the pedestrian signal is deeply confusing. It feels deeply dangerous. I do want to encourage you also, like I know there's a lot of families, a lot of sort of people who have accessibility needs for crossing this area. I want to encourage you to think about weighting vehicles versus pedestrians when you think about what's going to change. It is significantly easier for vehicles to go a little bit out of their way versus pedestrians. We know there are pedestrians, and myself included, who will go out of their way to avoid the intersection, who will say, oh, maybe I just won't go to this business or this location that's on the other side. I don't want to have to cross it. So I think in terms of how you weight this, there should be a little bit of like I think it takes a lot longer for a pedestrian to go one block out of their way to get somewhere. And I do want to repeat the comment about the sense of urgency. I think this is something people have really want. I want it would be good to have it fast. Have it soon. One thing I want to mention quickly, assuming I have time.
Yeah, no, just you're a bit over.
Okay.
If there might be time at the end, I'll call on you,
Okay.
raise your hand, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I also, to be a third person, want to echo the urgency around this. Appreciate that DOT is looking into it, but it would be helpful if we could pick up the pace. Thank you. All right, next I'm going to call on, let me just go to the list, sorry. Eric Jenkins Salin.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. I'm wondering if we could stop the screen share so I can get a little more FaceTime. I'm going to use a little visual aid here. Apparently I can't screen share, but my proposed redesign is called the Long Island. Essentially, it would be extending the current island farther north and south to physically block the left turns going into the intersection, which seem to be causing the most confusion. And
Eric, it's backward on the screen, so if you would like to just send that to the office, I'd be happy to forward it to DOT.
Wonderful.
It's inside out and backward.
Okay. So yeah, so the idea would be that by extending the island and creating, I believe, what you call the mountable island, or in to accommodate emergency vehicle traffic, I think that would discourage kind of reckless driving patterns where people will kind of go around or gun through left turn signage. And one thing that I wanted to highlight was that in your analysis of the second proposal, you talked about the types of people that would benefit, and you mentioned that 52% of users would see limited improvements, and then the 37% of pedestrians who would see improvement. My feeling is that more people would be attracted to this intersection, so that percentage of pedestrians that would benefit would increase dramatically as they patronize businesses in that area. And I think that's one way of gauging, how people feel about their safety there, is that when they feel safer there, they will go there more often. So I think essentially the benefit that you have calculated is an understatement, because it would be reducing demand for that intersection. So
get it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Casey, we've had a couple of people talk. I'm not sure if you want to respond in particular to anything that was said.
No, to some earlier comments about kind of going further, I think this could definitely just be a step one of looking at intersection improvements and even entire corridor improvements. This doesn't, preclude any like larger visions for Coney Island Avenue or Cortellia Road. So it could just be a more kind of spot treatment that we do right now. To the presentation, Eric, that you showed, I'm pretty sure I have a copy because I snooped on it in the neighborhood Facebook page when you posted it, but definitely send a copy and we'll review it. It was, I think, a bit of an inspiration for our number 2 proposal.
That's nice. Thank you.
And then I think yeah, we definitely do see that people would walk here if it did feel better. We did see an increase in pedestrians when we put the island in, so it makes sense that would happen again if we did further improvements.
Thank you. All right, so we have next on the list is Anthony Pepe. I don't see them in the participant list, but I'm just gonna give it a second. No. All right, Evan Sweet. Tom Gray.
Hi, Casey. I think I'm your neighbor. How you doing?
You are my neighbor. Hi, Tom.
And Evan lives next on our floor also. So it took me a second to recognize you in 2 dimensions, but I love the no left-hand turn plan. I just want to say I support it. I got 2 little kids. We cross that intersection. I really feel like it's the only solution is banning left-hand turns. So I really like it. And the only other suggestion I have is maybe raising the crosswalks on Cortellia, so that would slow everybody down who's making turns. But thank you for your work. I'll bother you in the hall.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely heard.
Next up is Tori. Sarah Belvis. Cheyenne Caddy. All right, Matt Denise.
Hi, yeah. I would echo the support for option 2 here. It seems like a good improvement and a win-win for everyone, because it'll be less confusing for drivers and it's not too far to go out of the way to the other alternatives. And also, yeah, I didn't echo that it would be good to look at multiple curbs or other things like that, kind of not just to be a physical barrier to drivers making the turn. That would be not a lot, but also just makes it a lot clearer what's happening there. I feel like there's a lot of signs on a lot of other intersections, so if it just depends on signage, it's easy for drivers to miss that. And then I just wanted to kind of tack onto this that while this is a particularly bad intersection, all of Coney Island Avenue is bad. And I know you're not looking at the whole corridor today, but would like to get it on DOT's radar that all of the corridor here could use improvement. And there's a pretty big opportunity for that, because currently there's 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, but there's a pretty good proof of concept that we could work with 1 line of traffic, because if you go down Coney Island Avenue at any hour of the day, there's always double parking every other block. So looking at that would help, because making the road narrower would make it safer, but it would also help make the light cycles shorter. So drivers would spend less time at red lights and pedestrians would spend less time waiting to cross. And then I had one question. So yeah, we would like to see changes at Cortel U as soon as possible, but I was wondering what kind of timeline DOT is looking at for how long it would take to come back with a whole proposal. Thank you.
Great questions. For Coney Island Avenue as a whole, I definitely think it's something that the agency can look at. We can bring it back to our groups for further discussion. For timeline, I think it really will depend on what alternative is picked. I think there definitely does seem to be consensus of trying to do something bigger here. This would be a pretty large signal heavy project, which we'd have to talk about signal capacity, but I think we would look to do in-house improvements next year. Once we develop a full proposal and come to the boards, I think we'd have a better idea of an exact timeline, but I think the goal is to potentially do something here in the near term. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nancy Mercado.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Casey, for that presentation. This is one of those rare occasions where seeing the sausage getting made is actually quite fascinating, and I'm grateful for everyone who's on this call. I just wanted to add that I live in Kensington on Cortel U, closer to Ocean Parkway, and I feel much safer crossing Ocean Parkway than I do in this intersection. I drive through this intersection. I walk through this intersection. I would never dare to bike through this intersection, but I do all three, and I would happily, as a driver, do something else other than turning left into this lane. My kids are tired of hearing me talk about how unsafe this intersection is. I will not let them cross with me in the pedestrian area. I go to the other side, which at least I feel like is a little more manageable. So I just wanted to echo what everyone else has been saying around the sense of urgency. To me, this feels like a disaster waiting to happen, and I really want to impress upon you to make this top priority, because it feels like it's only a matter of time before something terrible happens at the intersection, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, we've been talking about this for years. So I think the all pedestrian phase that you mentioned sounds great. A lot of the ideas that other people mentioned, I think, are also really terrific. Minor changes are just, to me, that's like not even an option, and sad to see that on the list of options. I know you have to sort of put that there too, but this feels like a major overhaul is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Gary Roth. All right, not seeing Gary Roth. Patrick Russell.
Good evening. I think my major points have been touched on, but none of this will be effective if parking enforcement is not real. One of the diagrams showed Coney Island Avenue coming south as being 2 lanes. Everybody knows it's only 1 lane. So of course there's going to be a backup to Avenue C if we change the lights. It's 1 lane. Parking enforcement cars are just left for months, even years, blocking sidewalks, double parking. There's even a no standing zone from 4 to 7 p.m. right on the corner of Coney Island and Cortel U Road that's never enforced. And usually cars are double parked there. So unless you can get parking enforcement, there is no point in doing any of this. Thank you.
No, I definitely agree. I think, partnering with NYPD to do increased enforcement is definitely something we can raise with them, and then also work with the board to raise awareness about that issue.
And one thing is that it's 2 precincts, which makes it that much more difficult. 2 community boards. It's a very complicated process, and I understand that, but at least we're raising our voices now to perhaps get something done. Those auto shops have blocked traffic. I've been here 35 years. They block access to the supermarket for the elderly. They block traffic Nobody does anything.
Thank you so much for your comment, Patrick. Next on the list is Cheryl Berkowitz.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry I'm off camera. I have COVID and I'm not beautiful right now, but I'm a pedestrian. I live right near that corner, and I have a 10-year-old son, and I won't cross in the middle, and I won't let anyone cross with my son. Like, that's just my rule. It's kind of my only rule. And I take the 68 a couple times a day, and I stand there in front of that deli basically, for a few minutes a day watching that intersection. And every single day someone almost gets hit. And I'm really interested in the way you use the data to inform this, because I think it's got kind of a garbage in, garbage out feel to me. Like, we count the number of formal complaints. Okay, most people are not going to do that, right? Just like most people are not going to show up to a meeting like this. And we count deaths and accidents, but what about the thousands of people who've gotten almost hit, And anytime anyone mentions that intersection, they talk about how bad it is or that they won't use it. And I'm just wondering if we can look at other ways to use the citizens to inform how dangerous this is. Like, a lot of times I've stood there thinking, I need to just stand here for a full day and record this on my camera, on my phone, so people really get it. I've filed some of those complaints, actually got an email back saying, we hear you, but we looked at it and we don't think there's a problem. And that's really like, it's, I think that the citizens can be used to inform this better, right? Like, I think everyone in this neighborhood has something to say about that intersection, but they're not really heard because no one has died yet.
Thanks, Cheryl. Casey, I'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. We are limited in our data. Like, we do, like, to track safety, we only use injury and fatality statistics. So we aren't able to really quantify those near miss scenarios. But I do think it does speak volumes that we are coming here, because by all counts, a 40% reduction in pedestrian injuries following a project is, in the rest of the city, kind of deemed a success to some extent. So we are coming back because we do know that there are still existing issues at the intersection. This was driven by that community outreach in earlier this year and in 2022, where we saw a spike in requests. So we are taking notice, and we do know that there are existing issues. But there are limitations in, like, quantifying some of those issues that people are having at the intersection, because there's just not ways to record that data easily. But your comments are definitely noted for sure.
Okay, great. I think next up is Joel Siegel.
For clarification purposes, Casey, first of all, I am totally in favor of an all pedestrian phase. That, I think that's essential to the intersection. But am I correct that having that all pedestrian phase requires elimination of the left turns because you're limited by the 120 seconds? Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. Yeah, so the all pedestrian phase and the banning of the left and through turns for Cortellia are linked, so we can't do one without the other.
Because of your 120-second parameter.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So let me I don't see anyone else raise hand. We've exhausted the public comment list. If you have comments that you want to make, we still have a little bit more time. Feel free to raise them, and I'll call on you. But since I have the floor for a bit, I will get on my soapbox for a second. Is it possible that even if you adopted the pedestrian, all pedestrian crossing, that you also add some, like, a vertical temporary raised, I don't know, material or flags for them, for drivers, to get them to slow down, just in case they decide to turn left anyway? Because I imagine the transition period from the old rules to the new rules is going to be a little rough. And And does that come with that or no?
Yeah, those would all be paired. So those improvements, so it would be adding the all pedestrian phase, banning the turns, and then reinforcing them with some sort of vertical element and additional signage. So those are all paired together as one, as the number 2 scenario. The biggest thing we need to do is we need to meet with the firehouse and talk through operations because, you know, the Pride of Flatbush is like an enormous fire truck and it has to make a lot of turns. So that's something we need to coordinate still. So that's something we need to do further review if that's the scenario we move forward with.
I understand. Okay, Joel, did you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I'm just curious, is it within the realm of possibility while you're mulling this all over to just simply put up a couple of emphatic signs to those people who do turn left that you have to yield to the pedestrians, right?
So that's something that we kind of considered as part of the minor improvements, and it's something we could look at doing in the near term. We are limited in this type of signage that's approved by the federal system, so I think that's something we could review. The issue with additional signage is that how effective is it? We can take a look at that, but in our experience, turning yielding signage has very minimal effect on behavior, unfortunately.
Cheryl.
Hi, me again. Thanks for your response before. I appreciate it. I think while we're on the subject of the yield, you mentioned earlier that people are supposed to give right of way to pedestrians, but in my experience, their turn, so maybe they think they're going straight on that dog leg, but no, I don't think anyone in a vehicle expects to yield to pedestrians when turning left. I think only turning right. Am I mistaken? Because I see people turning left there because they think they're going straight. Like maybe their GPS says continue on Cortellia and they're going straight, but they're actually going through two crosswalks, right?
No, I think that's like a good point. I think in general, when you turn left, you are required to yield, and that I think that is in general expected throughout the city. So if you were turning left at Cortellia onto Westminster, like it's expected that you yield to pedestrians. I think you do highlight one of the issues at this intersection is with that middle crosswalk, by design, we're trying to treat the through volume as the through traffic as a left and then a right. So you do like yield kind of at those crosswalks. I do think that's the kind of primary issue here is that drivers don't really agree with that and they treat it as a through and don't yield. So I think that's like kind of essentially the whole issue that we're trying to resolve with this, which would be resolved under the all ped phase.
Yeah, and I've actually seen people do what you're describing, and then everyone behind them honks at them.
Yes,
Until they go
I
through.
have been honked at while yielding to someone in the crosswalk.
All right. Thank you very much again. I think, Patrick, I'm not sure if you had a follow-up or if you just still have your hand raised.
No, thank you.
Okay, great. All right. We've exhausted the public comment list. I don't see any hands up in the meeting. So I think we're all set with this subject. Going once, going twice. Oh, there's Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I shouldn't have said that. Jeffrey,
Is
please.
it okay if I finish up my comment?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to mention being at Avenue C and CIA and seeing the cars that are coming onto the small side street Slogan Place. They are going very fast. I think there's a sense that I assume they're coming off of Ocean Parkway and they're like, I've been going fast for the last like 10 miles. I'm going to keep going fast as far as I can. I like Slogan Place, once you get here, is absolutely residential. Cars are not feeling like they need to be slowing down, need to be treating this. And it's residential for several blocks in the other direction too, before you get to Coney Island Avenue. So anything sort of on the physical side that could make it harder to speed and to sort of take these at full speed would be helpful. And I think also, as it's been mentioned a couple of times, there's double parking. There's a lot of abandoned car, not quite abandoned. There's the repair shops that are doing work on them. It effectively means the throughput on Coney Island Avenue in at least this couple of blocks in each direction is one lane only. So I think if some of the improvements you want to make or could make, like I say, more ambitious improvements would involve narrowing the streets, that's effectively accounted for. There isn't capacity for 2 lanes of traffic currently because of the way people are using the street. So there is room, I think, for more ambitious redesigns of the street to make it feel slower.
Yeah, just to respond to the Slocum comment, I do think a lot of drivers are using Slocum as a shortcut to avoid the left turn onto Cortellia at Coney Island. So if there was a left turn phase, I think a lot of that traffic would use the primary roads instead of taking shortcuts through the neighborhood. And we can take the comment back for additional improvements there. It might be decoupled from this project, but we can kind of note that and take that back.
Right. So I think I wasn't quite clear. What I'm saying is, from what I see about cars going fast, I assume they're doing the same thing at Cortellia and CIA, which is not right in front of me, so I see it slightly less often. Anything you can do on the sort of western side of those roads to encourage cars to slow down, both on Cortellia and on the other streets that come off of Ocean Parkway, I think would just have a good improvement for safety. Thank you.
All right, I think that's it for our speakers for tonight. I want to thank Casey and the DOT for coming and presenting to us, providing all the data and information and the options. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing some of these changes implemented, hopefully in the near future. I also want to thank all the board members, the members of the public, and any representatives who came tonight to discuss the subject. We really, really appreciate that. Your input in the community is super important.
And just Sean in the office for putting the meeting together.
Oh, yes, of course, and Sean in the office, of course. I don't know how to wrap up these meetings. Do we have to take a vote or we just say goodbye?
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
You can just end the meeting. Hi, it's Joanne. You can just end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All right. We are ending the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.